Welcome to the Refine and Shine, the podcast dedicated to mastering the art of continuous improvement and optimizing every aspect of your life. I'm Angelina Rivera, your host, and together we'll uncover the secrets to refining our lives, our habits, and our processes to unlock our inner brilliance. Join us on Refine and Shine, where we'll delve deep into achieving more in life without the burnout and without all the stress. This podcast is your platform for a more fulfilling life through continuous improvement and personal growth. In each episode, I and a diverse array of guests discuss practical strategies for up-leveling every aspect of your life. From developing good habits and organizing your space to refining your mindset and personal goals, we're going to explore it all. Our guests share personal stories about the systems they've developed or systems they've used and the tweaks they've made in their lives when refinement was needed, allowing them to truly shine. Listen to Refine and Shine to learn how you can implement continuous improvement techniques in your daily routine, develop and maintain healthy habits that lead to success and satisfaction, organize your life to reduce the stress and increase your productivity, foster a growth mindset that propels you to new heights. My mission is to inspire you to take bold action, make positive changes, and become the best version of yourself. Whether you're aiming to elevate your career, nurture meaningful relationships, or enhance your overall well-being, Refine and Shine is your guiding light. With over 25 years of experience in continuous improvement, I help businesses streamline their processes, establish efficient work areas, and implement standard work protocols. I have trained over 600 individuals and teams in process improvement, optimizing workflows, and enhancing overall operational efficiency. Tune in every week as we embark on an enlightening journey, exploring paths to refinement and illuminating the way to shine in every area of our lives. Subscribe now and join us on this journey to polish your life and let your best self shine through. Thank you for joining us on Refine and Shine. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Refine and Shine podcast. I'm super excited for my guest today. And I recently just met her. We met in March at an event that we both attended, and we just happened to sit by each other on the second day, I think it was, the second full day of the event. And I just got to know her. Maybe it was the first. I don't know. It was kind of a blur. The event was amazing. But I got to meet her, and I really didn't know her whole story because the event was a very busy event. But as we exchanged contact and I started following her on LinkedIn, I got to know more of her story. And she's just recently sent me her book that I'm reading right now. And so her story is amazing. And I just felt so blessed to have her on my podcast today. Her name is Claudia Cometa. She is a clinical pharmacist trained at the University of Florida, where she spent over a decade passionately advocating for her patients. Her perspective shifted profoundly when her father was diagnosed with stage 3 lymphoma, placing her on the patient side of the healthcare system. During that difficult year, Claudia realized the critical importance of having a knowledgeable consultant to help navigate the complex medical landscape. She witnessed firsthand how many patients are left to face their diagnosis and healing journeys alone. With lived experience from both sides of the healthcare equation, Claudia developed a deep understanding of what truly works and what doesn't. The insight helped her write her first book, Patient Empower Thyself, and to become certified in unreasonable hospitality. Deeply aware of life's brevity, Claudia has dedicated herself to transforming and evaluating the healthcare experiences for all. Thank you, Claudia, for being here today.
So honored. Thanks for inviting me.
So what I found interesting about your story, I mean, you are a doctor, and right away, right when I opened up your book, which I've been reading, is you kind of went through a journey. And I just love how you opened up your book is that, you not just are yourself are a doctor, but your husband's a doctor as well, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yes. So I am a doctorate of pharmacy. So that's PharmD. And my husband is a traditional medical doctor. So he is an MD. Yes, we both have doctorates in the healthcare system.
And through your being both being doctors, and I loved how you shared in your book, which everybody needs to buy, and we'll make sure we have the link in the show notes. But that you really didn't really think about healthcare or your own health and the way, and you just kind of transformed everything once your dad got this diagnosis. So can you tell us a little bit about that journey?
Yeah, so I think others might resonate with this, but other than bumps and bruises, my husband and I were not athletes, so we were not, getting orthopedic injuries all our lives or in and out of ERs. I mean, we were both relatively healthy, knock on wood. So were our families, and so we didn't have significant interactions, neither of us did, honestly, with the healthcare system as patients. So we were very much entrenched in our healthcare education. So my pharmacy school and his medical school. And so we were very much focused on healthcare in that way. But as far as paying attention to our own health or being concerned or being even aware of the things in our environment or the things in our foods that may or may not affect our health, it just was not a priority. It wasn't top of mind. It certainly wasn't taught to us in either pharmacy school or medical school. That's very much focused on, and I talk about that in the book, is very much focused on, what are the symptoms of disease? How do we diagnose it? And then how do we treat it with either meds or surgery? And so, health just wasn't, for our own health, it just wasn't top of mind. Like I said, we were otherwise healthy. And so we just weren't focused on that. And until we were faced with the stark reality of, oh, one of our family members actually has cancer. And now I need to reframe, like, what did I miss? What should we have been paying attention to? Is there something I should have known? And then, I just started to question everything I had learned in school. Was I taught the right way? Was there something that I was taught that shifted my belief systems in the wrong way? And so I went through a very, I know you're talking about refining, and I definitely refined. It was actually a lot of unlearning. What did I learn that is not serving me, and what do I need to now learn that I never did learn and never paid attention to? So yeah.
I think that that's so important because like one of the things that you said in the book was that like when you're going through med school, and it's a long process. Like, and I loved how you said that like when doctors are going through this, it's not because they don't want to help. They do want to help you. It's just they're not all given the right tools. And you're going, to become a doctor, that's quite was it 8 years of schooling, if I remember.
Yeah, so you have your 4 years if you go into medical school after your bachelor's. So your 4 years for your bachelor's, then your 4 years for your medical school, and that's just getting you through the didactic academic training. And then, depending on the type of physician you want to be, you're then going to go into some length of residency period. So a primary care doctor, a family doctor, it might be 3 years, but a lot of people will end up do a fellowship. If you're going to do something like neurosurgery, you're looking at probably another 7 or 8 years. So it's a very lengthy amount of time.
Yeah, and what you said was like you don't do all of this work just because you don't care. Like you do, the doctors do care. It's just that the overwhelming way of the system and the paper, the system itself, all the requirements and all the things makes it so hard to really get the dedicated time. And you're also taught, I think it's, if I can remember correctly, it's like bullet points of, okay, these are things that you symptoms or whatever, and just describe this medication. When there's other systems that you can do, like maybe changing your diet and all these other things. And so those are the things that you have to, to be able to have a patient or as a doctor to help your patient with that. It's kind of not that easy. And that's and it's different between the Western medical and people going more to a holistic type of wellness as well. Would you say that's correct?
Yeah. So the way that I kind of talk about it in the book and the way that I explain it to my clients is we have to understand the contextual realities of the medical system and the training of medical students and ultimately doctors, so you can know how to navigate it. So once you understand that the way that medical students are trained is very much, okay, here is a disease state. Let's say we're talking about cancer, or we're talking about heart disease, or we're talking about diabetes. Here is a disease state. Here's the physiology behind it. So here's what's happening in the body, why this is happening. Here are the symptoms of it. And then here's the medications that we use to treat it. And here are the orders in which to order these medications, right? At no point, now this is shifting, so I don't want to say this in a finite way or a overarching way, because there are some medical schools that are shifting this. It's a slow process, but as a whole, most medical schools are still teaching it that way, which means there aren't a lot of physicians who are coming out of medical school having a robust amount of knowledge in how our food affects our lifestyle, how our food and our lifestyle choices affect these diseases, how they are brought about. They're not taught like mind, body, spirit, right? Like we're not connecting the systems. And anybody who's been through the medical system feels that. My clients tell me they feel that. They say, I know that the constellation of symptoms that I am experiencing are all connected, but I'm being sent to the GI doctor for this one stomach issue, and I'm being sent to the neurologist for my headache. I know they're all connected, but the physicians aren't treating it that way. And so I'm going through these very siloed appointments, and it doesn't feel like they're seeing my body as a whole. But it's because the physicians aren't taught that way. So they're treating you in the way that they're taught, not because they don't want to see you as a whole, but you have to realize the contextual realities of the system so that you can navigate it appropriately. So when you start to feel that way, like it's being siloed, it's being separated, nobody's seeing my body as a whole, now what can I do? So let's utilize the Western medical system for their strengths. Like if you, God forbid, got into a car accident and you needed life-saving surgery, Western medicine's very good at that. Like they will save your life if you're having a heart attack. I mean, there are huge benefits, life-saving benefits to the traditional system. When we look more at chronic disease, that benefit really starts to wane quite a bit. And you really have to know how to find the practitioners that become a team for you to really tackle that and get to the root cause.
Yes, I love that. And I actually personally had stopped seeing a regular doctor, a general practitioner, because every time I go in, I wasn't getting the right type of care I needed, I felt, or I waited longer to be seen, and probably 5 minutes being actually seen. And then that was it. Or then the doctors kept shifting. They would leave, things like that. And so by the time you got lab work done, it was, you go to next appointment, the doctor's not there anymore. So I was like, I'm just done with it. Right. But then when other things, like there was pain that was radiating in my body, and I knew I had to start going back. I found a doctor she's really good. And what I love about her is that when she doesn't know the answer, she sends me somewhere else. She refers me. She's not quick to medicate. She's referred me. So, she'll send me to, like, I'm going to City of Hope, which is one of the top cancer doctors, for something that, it's not necessarily cancer that I'm dealing with, but it's, something that has helped from a previous surgery. And so I'm going to seeing that doctor, and then I'm seeing an orthopedic surgeon, a specialist. And I've dealt with back pain, chronic back pain, almost my whole life. And to finally see it, and so now to hear this orthopedic and helping him help me, and like physical therapy, they're not quick to give me medicine. They're quick to, like, let's get physical therapy. Let's do this. Let's do that. So I love that I finally found it. But, I'm 45 years old, and I finally found doctors who are working together to treat me, instead of having, just see this or do this or get lab work or meds or all those other things. And so I think that that's important, to find a team. And it took me quite a long time to find that. So I'm thankful for that. And I definitely understand what you're talking about. I just actually have a friend who's a doctor, and she actually just retired, and she's a nurse practitioner. And she just got her certification in the whole gut health system, because she found so much correlation. She's like, oh, now I can help people with just like the exercise, the eating, and all of these other things, because she still wants to help people, even though she's retired. But she's like, I still have life to give, or more to give. And so, and I think that's important. And what we eat and the foods we put in our body is so important. And what people don't understand is what they say, like, hey, we ate this as kids and we were fine. There's different stuff in our foods today than it was 20 years ago, or 30 years ago, or 40 years ago when we were growing up. So I think that's important as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. I know that your story is reflective of many who are listening, so I appreciate you sharing that.
What I also think is important too, is just that, like, what you do now, and you're more onto the advocate, shift to the advocate, being an advocate, and you have, clients that you help, and, just tell us a little bit about how you've shifted and what you're doing today to help others.
Yeah. So, it was one of those things that once I saw the system from my dad's perspective, from the patient's perspective, I couldn't unsee it and I couldn't go back to the work that I was doing because I knew that I would be limited in the impact I can have and the change that I can make. We know when you work inside of the system, you very much do what you're told, don't rock the boat, don't try to make changes, which, can be true of other industries as well, but certainly is true in healthcare. And so I knew that I couldn't go back. So in 2017, after my dad passed away, I actually switched courses and decided that it wasn't even a like analytical, logical decision in my mind. It was, this already has happened and I just have to execute on it. I've been shown a way that a path that I need to take. And I just have to take the next step. So it was very much, I needed to do for others what I had done for him, which was be there every step of the way. My dad was not medically trained. None of my family members are medically trained. And so, I watched how they felt in the system, which was very much hopeless, very much dismissed, and how, it's like if any of us go into a situation that we are not well versed in, I'll use an example of like a car dealership, right? Like I don't know anything about the mechanics of a car. I probably never will. And so if they tell me, XYZ needs to happen to your car, I don't really have any argument for that. I don't have a way of communicating about that. I don't even know what they're saying. I'm just hoping they're not taking advantage of me. And so, that sucks, but it's also a car. It's not our lives, right? In this situation of healthcare, it's your life or the life of a family member. And so you not being able to navigate it can mean life or death, unfortunately. And so, I just committed my path to helping others the way that I helped him, which means people will reach out to me in a variety of settings. Sometimes it's adult children. You're in my age, we're like basically the same age. So somebody our age with an elderly parent, and they may reach out and say, hey, my parent's in the ICU. I don't know what's going on. I feel like, something's not right, but how would I know how to ask the questions? I don't know what these labs mean. And so we'll lock arms and I'll become part of the team, not in an antagonist way to the team. I really kind of become part of the team because I know how to interact with medical team. That's pretty much the entire part of my career was interacting with medical team members. And so I know how to interact in a way that is cohesive and engaging and not antagonistic. And I just become part of the team and I could become a second set of eyes on labs. Is there anything that doesn't look right? What are the meds contributing to anything? There's just things that get missed and errors that happen that are not intentional. There's no malintention on the part of the team, but things just happen. And in fact, they happen so much that medical errors are the third leading cause of death in the US when we don't have a pandemic. So outside of pandemic, the third leading cause of death is medical errors. That's huge. And so it's not something small or benign. It can be life or death. And so that's what I do. So my clients, reach out to me with a variety of concerns. Sometimes it's not the ICU. It doesn't necessarily have to be that acute of an illness, but it could just be, hey, I've been dealing with this new diagnosis. I don't feel like I'm, really knowing how to navigate this. My doctors kind of seem like they care, but I don't really know. I don't know if I have a good team. Can you evaluate this? And some people are, have me stay on board with them for like years. I mean, there's clients I've had for 4 or 5 years and I still attend every doctor's appointment with them. If they're not in my area, I'm on speakerphone or I'm at the telehealth visit, just very much like this. And I'm part of their team and I've been with them long enough that I can speak to their history. So if they see a new doctor or the doctor doesn't remember something, I do because I have a much smaller client list than they do, right? So they may be seeing hundreds, some of them thousands of patients. I don't see anywhere near that many. At any given time, I might have 10, and I'm going very deep with them. And so I know their history very well. And so it's sort of we get lawyers on board when we need something, right? We want legal advice, but when we navigate our healthcare, it's like we just kind of passively hand it over to the system and we hope for the best. And so this is just a heightened level of attentiveness to have somebody like me by your side, making sure you're getting what you need, recognizing when things don't sound right, or they're recommending a medication that I know based on lab work and based on your history probably isn't going to be a good fit. Just having that sort of concierge level attentiveness to your care that's basically what I do.
I love that because that's so needed. I mean, like, when I'm given medications, like I like have to look at, and I'm a well state, like I'm not in like where I have the mental, like I'm still in a good, healthy state of mind, right? So I go look at my medications and I'm like, okay, does this match what this doctor prescribed? Do they have any interaction? What's the best way to take them? One of them I found, I was like, oh, you need to do lab work all the time. You take this, and I'm like, my doctor prescribed it, and I haven't taken it yet because it's as needed. And I'm like, but you need lab work, and she's never once said, which is one thing I have an issue with my doctor, but never once said, oh, let's follow up on your lab work. It's like those types of things, like we need to redo your lab work, and it's been 6 months. And so those are some of the things. Like I started doing that research because there was a time when a family member of mine was going through, like felt like they were a guinea pig and just kept getting medication, and not dealing with the root cause of their issues and their mental health. So I'm very wary about putting medication in my mouth. And I know that medication has a reason and that there's a need for it. And I get all of that because I do take some meds, but it's, when I would find it, like they would fall asleep and you'd have to make sure that they wake up. Like those are the types of things like this can't happen anymore. And some of the medications were interacting, but the doctor never told them, don't take this with this and this, and, all of those types of things. And so I know that that's important, and really to have somebody like that, like on your side, especially when people with like the mental health has, gone up tremendously. And it's just crazy how much like drugs can be interacted, or people found that they're going through all these, doctors, or the doctors aren't there, or their lab work and their lab work's not being read to them. They don't understand it. That's a very hard job to figure out. And so you kind of add as that third party just to validate and help them with what the journey they're on. Is that correct?
Yeah, absolutely. So depending on the situation, it might be me talking to a patient about, hey, I know the doctor recommended this medication. Let's bring up some of these concerns that I have with them at the next visit. If we're talking about somebody who's, say, at a nursing home, a nursing facility, a rehab facility, and, the physical therapist is saying, hey, this patient's never participating in our physical therapy sessions and can't get stronger, then I'm looking at the meds and I'm seeing, okay, are we on like multiple sedating medications? And this person, of course, can't. If you and I are on Benadryl all day long, we can't be active at physical therapy, and we're much younger than they are. So there's things that need to be optimized that are largely overlooked oftentimes. And so that's kind of my job, is to make sure we are optimizing the situation, helping the body heal as it knows how to do, but it can only do if it has what it needs. And we certainly can't heal optimally if we are taking 20 medications, some of which are knocking us out sleep all day long. We certainly can't get our strength back. So yeah, there's just a lot of nuances to making sure all of the pieces are working for the patient and not against them. And unfortunately, most healthcare professionals just have way too many patients to be spending the time necessary to optimize. It's not that they don't want to, but the reality is the system doesn't allow for the attentiveness that's required.
So with all the things that you help with, do you ever have a challenge? Does it ever a challenge with, because you say you're like on the Zoom call, your speaker call, do you ever have a hard time? Do the doctors accept that you were there to advocate for the person?
It's a good question. I get asked often this question, and I don't have any problems. And the reason that I don't have any problems is because I know how to interact with them so that they know that my presence isn't in any way an obstacle, an obstruction, because when they are helping this patient, they need the information that they need. They need a complete set of information to make decisions. And they also need to make sure on the back end that once that call is done or that visit is done, that the patient understands everything that was said. And so I help with all of that. So once they realize, and it just takes the first time for me to explain this, once they realize that I'm actually a huge help for them, because when my patient doesn't necessarily remember pieces of like why they couldn't take a statin in the past, I remember that it was because it harmed their kidneys. And so like I can fill in all of those gaps during the sort of interview intake process. And then I can also fill in the gaps in the back end. If a patient has a question afterwards, I can tell them what was said, what was directed, and they don't have to go on the portal or make a phone call to the office. So it benefits everybody. And it's just a matter of explaining that for people some of the offices who aren't familiar with somebody like me being present. And then after that, I'm asking questions about how their mom's doing. And then, we're all best friends. So.
Well, what I say is, I think it's important. I mean, so when you start working with a patient then, or, a client, I guess you could say, do you go and go through overall through their whole health history with them and all of these things? And like, do you review their medical records? Like, tell us how that goes. Like the part where a client first or wants to work with you. How does that intake process work?
Yeah, perfect. So, so typically we'll start out with a call that gives me a snapshot of what's been going on. So where kind of have you been in your words, what's been going on? What are your goals that are not being met right now? And so it kind of gives me an idea of, is working with me the best fit? So like, a couple times I've had people, like they're really, what they need is like transportation to their doctor's offices, or, like they're not really looking for, or they need insurance-based help, and it's not necessarily clinical or medical. And so once I find out that we're on the same page and what they need is what I provide, then the onboarding goes to the next step, which is just getting them set up on my electronic medical record system. And I just recently changed to one that's super fantastic, and actually will pull in. So once the patient logs into their online portal on their own, once I onboard them, then it will pull in all of their labs so I can actually see what's been going on. So then I will review all of that. So we'll look through the labs. I'll look through what they've told me as far as their symptoms. We'll look through some of the physician notes so I can get an idea of what have the physicians been thinking, like where has their mind been as far as like, diagnostics or treatment. And then we'll pull all of that together and then decide on, okay, have there been some labs that I would say are red flags? They might look normal, but what I tell people oftentimes is I'll see patterns in labs. So let's say, for instance, platelets, which are part of your complete blood count, the range for the value can be anywhere between 150 to 400. And that's a pretty big range. So if you had a platelet number 3 years ago at 400 and consistently it's been dropping like 400 to 350 to 200, well, all of those numbers technically are normal and in range. And so they aren't coming up as critical on the lab. They're not showing red or bold, but I'm seeing that there's been a consistent pattern coming down. It's not like it's fluctuating. It's just on a consistent decline. Then that's something that we need to bring up at the next doctor's office. And, because it's easy that was missed. It shows normal on every single lab, but there's just patterns. Or a lot of times, like nobody's checking a vitamin D level, and a vitamin D level is very important for our immune system and for our overall health. And so if that's really low and we're deficient and we have no idea, we need to find that out. Or inflammatory markers oftentimes are not checked. And so sometimes it'll be, okay, here's where your labs are looking good, but there's a few markers that would help us based on your symptoms, put these puzzle pieces together, and they haven't been checked. So let's talk to your doctor about adding those to the next set of labs. So I'm not actually ordering anything or making decisions. I'm becoming part of the team and bringing these things up at the next doctor's office. I'm not like in the background, doing things like a mad scientist. It's more just like, let's come to this next appointment armed with information and ready to ask very pertinent and pointed questions.
I think that's amazing because, as I said earlier, no, it was a while since I've been to a doctor, and just recently, yeah, in October, September this year, I had started going back, or last year, started going back to a doctor after probably 7 or 8 years not going to a doctor. But even just like pulling up my portal or finding all the things, and like I forgot things, like I forgot x-rays that had been done, all of that stuff, and different doctors. And it was orthopedic who had brought specialists who said, hey, you have significant changes from this x-ray to this x-ray. And I was there for my knee, and he goes, I don't want to talk to, if your knee's okay, like it's probably just a sprain or something, but I want to talk to you about your neck because I see a significant change. And that was really surprising that I had a doctor come to me to say something like that. But they were able to access all these things, and I had totally forgot about something that happened in 2008. So your portal is able to pull up everything that they have under, like, is it like, that's amazing.
Yeah. So yeah, it's called Primary Record, and I don't own Primary Record. Like, it's not my tech, but I am a practitioner under there. And so once a patient is onboarded on there and they connect their online portals, then it all sort of flows in and I can review everything. There's a few nuances that don't flow in, and we can get those later and they can upload them. But yeah, the point is, like, let's pull in, because a lot of people have doctors at a lot of different hospital systems, and those things don't typically talk to each other. And so once they connect connect their portals, then I can see all the labs and stuff from everywhere. And we can kind of pull all these pieces together and start to get an idea, very much like your doctor did, like you had forgotten about an x-ray. They're taking the time to review, which is great, and compare. Because yeah, if there have been changes, like we need to know about them. We're not trying to wait until we're debilitated and we are in the ICU. Like, yeah, let's know about it now and let's get on top of it now. And so similar approach is let's get through. If we're in an acute situation, like an ICU, the first goal is to get out of the ICU, right? But then if we're in a situation, say somebody like you who's otherwise healthy, maybe has a few concerns, we're focused on optimization. We're not trying to get out of an ICU. We're trying to make sure we are optimized. And I do the same thing for my own health. I mean, when I go, see my functional medicine doctor or whatever, oftentimes I'm not coming with a symptom. I'm coming saying, I otherwise feel good, but let's do the test to see what else I can optimize. Maybe I'm deficient in a certain nutrient, a mineral, a vitamin. What can I do to optimize? Because a lot of times the system has taught us, and our ancestors have taught us. So depending on how our parents approach their healthcare and our grandparents, we only look for doctors or medical professionals when there's something wrong. So we're waiting. It's very reactive. But that's not really the best approach. How can we be proactive in our everyday life, but also with testing? I don't want to just get labs to identify what's wrong. I don't want to just go get my mammogram to wait until something is seen. Like, I'm trying to be proactive. And so optimization is a huge part of it.
Yeah, that was going to be my next question is like, does somebody have to wait to work with you until there's something wrong, or could they be proactive and start working on like, hey, I want to like live to be, 100. And so I want to like start working with you now, even though I don't really have any issues, but just want you to review everything just to make sure that I'm living the best life.
Absolutely. That's the optimal approach. I tell people all the time, I will jump into the fire if somebody is, like really struggling and they're in, the proverbial fire of the healthcare system. I will jump in there with you, but it is much better if you get me on board before there's any fire, and we can prevent the fire from even breaking out. So yeah, the earlier the better. And that might just be like, hey, we have one visit, we go over everything. Maybe everything's otherwise good. Maybe there's a few labs we want to order. And maybe you just reach out to me every year or whatever. Much better that way than to call me from the ICU. So yeah, it's always better to be proactive.
I think that that's amazing. And just how young do you really do you have a certain age range of your clients, or do you have all types of spectrum, like the age range from 20 to 80,
yeah.
100?
Actually, my youngest client was like 8 years old. And then my oldest was probably late 80s. So really, really all across the board. And, so like for the child, it was the parent tiring me because of just, a few things that seem to be falling through the cracks. And that's also been a long-term client of mine. And, so it's really, and then, a few clients, my elderly clients over the years, we've lost, like they've passed away, and I'm at the funeral. Like, I will do I'm part of the honestly, I become part of the family. And I will go to the ends of the earth to be there for the family at all times, including if that person passes away, because these people have become part of my extended family. And it's a huge deal to me if something like that happens. And I've been close to the family. And so yeah, it's really 0 to 100.
I think that's amazing. And I just wanted to ask you, because you went and like changed your whole career path. Like, you changed everything. And so some people that might be out there listening is like, how do you do that? Like, how do you go from, and I'm just even thinking about like how the shift of like even the finances, like, was that like a shocker to go from one type of income to what you're doing now? And like that, not even like so there's one thing with money, like people are so scared to make a change or to make a shift in their life, even if they're doing a job that they don't like, or they're doing stuff in their job that they don't like, because they're scared of like losing income. But how has it not only changed like how has it changed you personally? Like your health, your just your ability, the way that you see things now, like is it less stress? Like, tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, well, if anybody's ever known a pharmacist or seen a pharmacist, we're not usually the picture of zen and peace and smiles and joy, unfortunately. And so whether that's a retail pharmacy or hospital pharmacy, in general, pharmacists are, as are most healthcare professionals, looking for a way out. It's a sad state of affairs. And so I was working, before I made this switch, I was working 2 jobs. I was working 4 10-hour shifts. I was also working a second job. I was taking shifts at a Target retail pharmacy in addition to working a clinical job. When I was at the Target pharmacy, it was a 12-hour shift. And so I would, I would have no time for lunch. Back then we didn't close for lunch. And so I would literally run over to the Target market, which of course is not anything healthy. And I would literally grab like a handful of breadsticks and marinara sauce, and that would be my lunch. And that's literally all I ate all day long. I don't think they had Starbucks in the Targets then, so I wasn't fueling with coffee as much. But no, it was terrible. I mean, I was just exhausted. I was not healthy. I was much thinner than I am now, mostly because I just didn't have time to eat, and was running on fumes. And so yeah, things are way different now. And the transition is hard. Any transition is difficult. Change is difficult. If it was easy, everybody would just jump and make the next change. And so not everybody is willing to go through that transition period. Obviously, like I was and still am married. And so my husband had his income. So I understand that this is much more difficult for somebody who might be the sole income earner. And so for a lot of people who are in that position, or if they're the breadwinner, you might have to work tandem, and I actually did for a little bit. I picked up some PRN jobs every now and then to supplement, because when you're starting a business, you're not just starting out with 20 new clients, right? You've got to build the business. You've got some overhead costs at the beginning. And so that can be overwhelming. It can be intimidating. It can feel like a mountain you just can't climb. And there's a lot of things you don't know. The uncertainty can be a mindset block for a lot of people, and is for a lot of pharmacists who are trying to make a change, and non-pharmacists. But really for me, and I think this is really key, is the decision to go into pharmacy was very logical, analytical. It fell into all of the boxes for me. I wanted to help people. I wanted to, I was good at chemistry, like science and chemistry was a strong suit of mine. And so that made sense. Like I wanted to have a career that was relatively financially lucrative and that I could support a family with later on, and have flexibility. Like if I wanted to drop down to a couple days because I had a child, all the things. And so it checked all the boxes. When I decided to do this, it was not logical. It was illogical. I didn't have an MBA. I didn't know what I was doing. Nobody thought like this made any sense. I mean, they thought that the idea made sense because people do need advocates, but they were like, you don't know what you're doing. And I didn't know how to make a website. I mean, like there was so way more that I didn't know than I did know. And so it didn't make any analytical sense. It checked no boxes. And so, but I knew I knew I needed to do this from a different place inside of me, like it wasn't a head decision. It was very much a heart decision. And so it was just a matter of following it. And I think a lot of us have life events that guide us in a different way, and we have to make decisions from a different place. And making decisions from a deeper, like soul heart place is a way different feel than a mind analytical logical place. And so you just kind of jump into the unknown, and that's not a great feeling for a lot of people, or for any of us. But when you know it with that level of certainty that you need to do this, you just don't care. I don't even know how to explain it unless you've been through it. You'll do whatever it takes, and you're willing to fail, and you're willing to look stupid, and you're willing to to do things you weren't willing to do before. And there's definitely been points where it's been like, okay, does this make sense? Does this make financial sense? There's been some years that have been really great, and I've had a whole lot of clients. It can be feast or famine, just like real estate can be feast or famine. And that's part of entrepreneurship, right? I mean, there's times when we have a robust amount of clients, and there's times when, like during COVID or whatever, and I couldn't necessarily be where I needed to be for my clients. And so maybe I didn't have as many at certain points, and that can be terrifying too. So, I would just say when you shift how you're making decisions into like what is your whole body telling you to do versus what is your mind telling you to do, we can make lists of pros and cons all day long, and we'll never we'll never end the list of pros and cons. And we're making decisions based on belief systems that may not be serving us and all of those things. And I know you know all that, and probably your audience knows all of that. So yeah, it was jumping into an abyss that I didn't know what I was getting into. But I don't regret a single minute of it, and I would do it all again in a heartbeat.
I think that that's so important. And, I've had to make changes where, and I am the breadwinner of my family. My husband's medically disabled, so does not work. But when I decided to leave a job and that I was working on for 17 years and take another job that I'd have to fly back and forth every week back to the East Coast from the West Coast, and everybody's like, it doesn't make sense. And I'm like, but I'm going to be at home every weekend, where in the old job, I had to work 6 days a week, sometimes 12-hour days. And even if I had to be away a couple of nights, I was home on the weekends. And it just didn't make sense. And a lot of people didn't say it didn't make sense, but in my heart, it made sense. And I know that God doesn't put anything on your heart if it's to make you fail. And yes, there's going to be lessons learned and there's going to be ups and downs, but there's highs and lows in everything. And I think that that's important. So thank you for sharing that. So from the time that you did all of this, when did you just come out with your book?
Yeah, so the book just launched on World Cancer Day of this year, which was February 4 of 2025. And so, yeah, it's been out a couple of months now, which is crazy. It's just crazy. The whole thing has been kind of crazy. But I've known for a while that I wanted there to be an option. Not everybody has the financial means or the ability to hire somebody like me. So I really wanted to get something out into the world that people could read and kind of reframe their paradigm around how they're approaching their health and healthcare. So the intention of the book was not necessarily to make it like a checkpoint where, okay, ask your doctor this question, or, workbook. It's not that type of a book. It's more of a, how do we start to think differently? And we can't think differently if there's parts of the system we don't understand. So it's like first outlining, here's what you need to understand about the system. And then here are some real life examples, obviously with name changed. And, I'm not providing any information on my actual clients. The names have been changed, but here are some real life examples of clients that I've had to use those stories to illustrate the paradigm shift. Like, here's how we need to start shifting how we think about health, how we think about our healthcare. Maybe your parents taught you a certain way. Maybe your grandparents taught you a certain way. We only, when we know better, we do better. They did what they knew. And, now we just have more knowledge at our fingertips. And we are really being asked in a lot of ways, internally, God-driven ask to change the way that we do things. Otherwise it's just not serving us. And so, it's helping people sort of make that paradigm shift.
Well, I certainly have read it. I'm halfway through, and the reason why I'm taking my time reading it is because it's so good, and you have these things throughout the book, and they're called peace points, and it just helps me it's like action steps, and it's having me like write down things for like, okay, I have this doctor's appointment on this day, and these are the questions I want to ask. And, and that's how I thought about the labs. And I'm like, are the labs for the medication? And I just really started looking at everything and putting everything together, because it's like, I'm perfectly sane to do this right now. So I want to make sure that I have all my medical stuff all together, all the questions that I need. And then I start documenting these things, or, my health journey, put all my medical together, so that who knows what, if 20 years from now, 30, 40 years from now, if I'm ever sick, or, God forbid something happens to me, that my family knows all my medical, or, all the things, what prescriptions I'm on, and all of these things. Because as, like the head of my household, you don't think about those things. Like, what if something happens to you? And, I was in a car accident, a hit and run accident, which thankfully wasn't that bad. But it was like, if it could have been worse. And if I got wiped out, would my family know what medications I was on, or all of these things? And so trying to put all that together. And then, of course, I just recently had surgery, and I was like, what if something happens, when you get put to sleep? But it's all of these things that makes you really shift your life, or shift the way that you're thinking. And this book really has helped. And so I recommend everybody to get this book, because it's a very easy read, and there's a bunch of eye openers, and the peace points is so helpful, even telling us to breathe while we're reading it. to take a deep breath and not to get frustrated, but kind of understanding the system. And, that it just makes you fully, shift your perspective a lot. And so I thank you for taking the time to write this book. I'm sure it wasn't easy. And it was probably a little bit emotional too, going back and talking about your father's journey and everything as well.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for reading it and reflecting on it and sharing your insights. It's certainly, my goal is for that to be like the best $16 people spend. I mean, I think we can drop $16 nowadays on literally anything. And if this can feel like a good value for your $16, I mean, it's certainly not the biggest money maker on my end, but it's the people telling me how much it's affecting them and how much it's changing. Even healthcare, even previous pharmacy, supervisors of mine and health CEOs of hospitals telling me they're going to have their leadership team read it. That is not something I ever anticipated, but it's amazing that people like they see that we need to shift things, and for my book to play any role in that is huge for me.
I appreciate that. And so before we wrap up, which I'm going to share your links, how to get to your website, how to order the book. But before we wrap up, I always ask my guests to do this. But what is one, like a word, a phrase, or a type of action that my listeners can do today in order to help them refine and shine?
Yeah, I would say in the healthcare space, what comes to mind first for me is to bring yourself to the table. And what I mean by that is when you go into a healthcare environment, there is a proverbial conference table, and it's like the nurse and the doctor, and maybe it's multiple doctors, and you're like in a completely different room waiting for them to have their meeting and come back to you. And so the action is to bring yourself to the table, meaning don't discount that you are an expert on your body well beyond what they're able to ever experience. Yes, they have the book knowledge, and yes, they have gone through an insane amount of schooling, but there is no way they could ever know what you know about your own body. And so get yourself a seat at that table and make sure that you're bringing your own experience there. And if there is something that they are saying, a treatment path that they are recommending that just is not feeling aligned, you need to listen to that gut feeling and continue to search, maybe get a few other opinions, but bring yourself to the table.
I love that. That's so important. And I just like, as you were saying that, I can just picture myself. And that's kind of what like the last doctor that I went to, the one that just did my surgery, my urologist, I really made sure that I was like asking all the questions, getting all like, and it felt so good. And I don't think that I would have been there had I not been working and trying to put all myself together. And for some reason, I just started putting all my health stuff together and everything. And then I read this book and I'm like, this is why I'm doing it, because there's something you just never know. Like, we're not guaranteed tomorrow. So just to make sure that we're medically fit to get it while we are, I think is so important. And I just loved having you on as my guest. And I loved everything that you shared, because I really think it'll help the listeners. I mean, we got to be an advocate for ourselves, for our healthcare. And if we can't do that ourselves, read this book to help us guide us through it. And if they need you, to hire you, and they can do that they need to definitely do that, and not to wait until they're in the ICU or in a dealing with cancer or any of those things, like, to be able to prevent and to have optimization, I think is helpful. So thank you so much.
Thank you for having me on.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of Refine and Shine. We hope you find valuable insights and inspiration to fuel your journey of continuous improvement. Remember, the key to success lies in refining your processes and letting your inner brilliance shine. If you've enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe to the podcast and leave a review. Your feedback is greatly appreciated and helps us reach more listeners like you who are eager to refine and shine in all areas of life. Stay connected with us on social media for updates and additional resources and behind-the-scenes content. We love hearing from our listeners, so feel free to reach out with any suggestions, questions, or success stories you'd like to share. As we wrap up, remember that the power to transform your life lies within you. Keep striving for growth, embracing change, and seeking opportunities to refine your skills. Together, let's continue to shine bright and make a positive impact in the world. Until next time, keep refining and keep shining.